Hey everyone, welcome to today's meetup. Welcome to the .NET Foundation. We are part of the .NET Foundation group. Welcome to the Pittsburgh .NET user group. So we could join with meetup.com/pgh.net, or we have a LinkedIn account as well. You can follow for our meetups. So we do host meetups every month, bringing in different topics. Today's topic is working with ChatGPT for developers, hands-on approach, which is the more trending topic in today's world. And for the we are having Mike Benkovich, who will be sharing his knowledge. And Mike Benkovich is alumni with Microsoft from 2004 to 2012, and he has done a lot of work in the community, and he has run a lot of Azure boot camps. And he started as Toastmasters Club in 2009. He's still going solid and helping others to grow speakers in the conferences. He's also a LinkedIn instructor. He has done a lot of courses in Azure, governance and other stuff. I will bring him on stage. Mike, welcome to the group.
Well, thank you very much. And hey, welcome to the ChatGPT for Developers talk. My name is Mike Benkovich, and I'm excited to be here with you today. I've got a bunch of background. You can say, who's Mike Benkovich? There's a bunch of different information you could go to. One of the things is that I'm from Minnesota. I used to be a Microsoft MSDN evangelist, which meant that I did developer tools and help people understand how to use Visual Studio to go out and build cool things like Windows apps with WPF, Windows Phone, Azure, Office, pretty much everything. I'm also a LinkedIn learning instructor, and I've got courses on my website. If you go to benkotips.com, you can download and go through a lot of these courses that I've done. A lot of the things I've got in the catalog right now are around Azure and Azure governance, but I'm working on some new stuff that has got some more AI-ish kind of things. If you're interested in getting together or chatting about whatever, send me some feedback. Mike@benko.com is my email. mbenko is on Twitter, but you can also go to my bit.ly link to Azure Hours, or Office Hours, and we get together on Fridays, talk about anything Azure. My LinkedIn barcode is there if you want to be friends, and then reach out to me. I'm pretty good about answering questions and concerns on there. Today we're talking about how AI is one of those things that is really coming into its own. It's this new technology. It's a new way of applying technology to be able to go out and do interesting things, like go out and build applications, be able to work with it. And it's kind of meant as kind of an intro to what is AI and how do I use it? How does it fit in? ChatGPT is a model that's available from OpenAI. We'll talk a little bit about how we can use ChatGPT to use it to write code, to build things, to do interesting things. It's a large language model, so we'll kind of talk about what is a large language model, what does that mean to us. We'll also dive into copilots, the OpenAI service. We'll talk about prompt flow and next things you can go out and do. So hopefully this will give you a good start on diving into AI in today's world. So when we talk about artificial intelligence, the thing that people like to say is that, are we ready for it? Is it something that we can deal with? And reality is that artificial intelligence is kind of one of those things where you wonder, is there really anything to be scared about? But in all reality, it's just a tool. It's a tool we can use to go out and process and work with data, work with information. And to kind of get started with it, I want to spend today doing more or less, more coding and less talking. And to kind of get us into it, I've got a repo, and I can go out here and I'll show you this. So if you go to GitHub.com and you go to Benko tips, and you go say Chat GPT for devs. This is a repo that I've got that has kind of a starting place for working with the code we're going to do today. And I'll make this a little bit bigger so you can kind of see the stuff that's out there. But I've cloned this repository, and I've got it sitting here, and I've got a kind of a startup here. So I've got a README that kind of is telling us what we're going to do. And so this is called ChatGPT for developers. Let's make this a little bit bigger. ChatGPT is a tool you can get to from by going out to chat.openai.com, typing in chat.openai.com. If you haven't done that before, it takes you to a place where you can go out and work with the GPT model. In here, we can do things like tell me about ChatGPT, what it is. And it'll do a good job of going out and trying to include and pull back information from the internet about what is AI and what is ChatGPT. And as you can see, I might not even have to do a whole lot of talking here today, because it's kind of like going to go out and just fill in the screen with the information about what is ChatGPT. In fact, I could say, hey, give me a presentation on ChatGPT for devs. And because it's a large language model that's trained on the internet, it'll go out and actually create an actual presentation. So I don't even have to do this talk, because you could go out and you could just watch this. Now, how good it would be? Well, I guess it depends on how good we ask questions. One of the things about AI is that it is a challenge to say, okay, how can I ask better questions? As we can see, it gave us 10 slides, 10 things to talk about. I actually want to do this with some demos. So I can say, show some demos for this. And AI is smart enough to know that this refers to the AI talk that I just presented. So it's actually going to go out and say, hey, you should create a chat interface and maybe do a content creation. Well, I wonder if we'll do that kind of thing. It's all kind of interesting to see how well it does with generating content for doing presentations like this. Because not only can I ask it to tell me about the demos, but I could also say, this is great, but maybe I want to hear about, write a limerick about it. And even though I misspelled limerick, write a limerick. The GPT model, assuming when it's working, does a good job of actually presenting and going through and giving us some feedback. But as you can see, it's not exactly working right now. In fact, I've typed in a couple of prompts and it's not really responding, which makes me wonder what's going on. Well, I was looking at the OpenAI status, and today we're doing our demo, we've got some outages that are actually sort of impacting how our talk is going to run, which makes you wonder, okay, well, if AI is so great, well, how can I make it do what I need it to do when I need it to do it? Let's try this one more time. Can you write a limerick about it? And submit. And it's still not really responding, which then comes back to say, okay, well, what are these large language models and how are they supposed to work? And what do you do when the internet doesn't quite fit? Okay, so it's running slowly. Now I've got it coming back. Here's a limerick. So in a world where AI is a big bet, there's a tool that's quite hard to forget. GPT is its name, conversing its game, but it's slow and I'm not sure I can trust it. So yeah, the notice that it's even asking about writing a limerick about how when it's not available, things can be challenging. Sometimes I like to dive into this. I say, well, how much can I do with this? How much of the different ways can I process language? I mean, it's good at writing limericks. I can have it, tell me about changing spark plugs on a car, and it's trained on. So what it is it is a large language model, is a decision engine that goes through, and it's basically doing completions of a sentence where it's trying to figure out what's the most likely words to fill out and complete a process. And so it'll go through and then figure out and predict that this is the most likely thing that I want to hear. Now, ChatGPT is one of these tools, but there's other tools that I could use as well. But I can do things like have it write code, write an asteroids game in HTML. Let's do this in HTML and JavaScript as a single file. And don't include comments, but make it cool. Allow me to shoot the asteroids, and if I get hit 3 times, game is over. And ChatGPT will take my prompt and it'll feed it into a model that is a codex. And a codex is a coding model that lets me go out and say, okay, create some actual code that is looks like this. The cool thing about this is it actually creates JavaScript. Kind of interesting how slow it's running today, but as I said, the status shows that it's actually running a little bit slow. But you can see what it's doing is it's actually creating actual code for me with functions that will move my ship around and allow me to do things with this. When it gets done.
Hey, Mike.
Yeah.
Sorry to interrupt. There have been the sound is a little bit choppy. A lot of people are complaining. Is there anything that you can help?
Okay. Is the let's see, I'm connected up to, let me check my settings here. Yeah, definitely. We want to make sure that you can hear me. So on audio, I'm set up for this speaker phone. I could try setting up a headset. Let me try that.
Yeah, sure. Thank you.
Okay. All right, hold on a second. Okay, so if the sound is there. All right, is that changing the sound? Does that sound any better?
There is a little bit pop in the end whenever you speak, and it kind of it's a little bit better, I would say, but still there is a popping. I don't know what's the reason.
Try this. Does that sound better?
Yeah, this is much better.
Okay. All right.
Thank you.
So basically, right now, I've gone out and I've asked ChatGPT to create some code for me that draws and creates a game. I can, maybe even use this and actually see if it works. So the code snippet does a bunch of different things. I think the best way to see what it's doing is to actually go into our application. And I've got a ASP.NET application here where I've got a chat application. I've got a page that's called index. I can actually add a new page here. So I'm going to add a page, call it asteroids.cshhtml. And I'll put a page directive on here. And I'm going to paste in that code that ChatGPT created for me. And if I did this right, and I say, go ahead and run this, I should be able to go out and build it. And if the build command works, I'll do a quick restore on the project. And then depending on the speed of my internet, I should be able to go out and see if my code that we created in ChatGPT to do an asteroids game, this stuff actually works. So let's come back to, here's our game. And there it's loading. You can see the debug console starting up. And we'll give it a second. And here's, it's going out and we go to this and go this / asteroids. And there's my ship. I can move it. But I don't see any asteroids. It looks kind of, and then, yeah, it seems a little bit odd. I don't know if you can see the ship moving around, but I'm not really thrilled with how this game works because there's no asteroids. So what I would normally do is go out to ChatGPT and yell at it and say, hey, there's no asteroids in the game. Make something for me to shoot at. So it'll actually go out and say, yeah, well, okay, looks like we missed a few things. So it'll regenerate some code for me. And the nice thing about this is that I could go out and figure out how to do this myself, but this is like having a junior programmer or another person, another assistant, if you will, helping me out by doing the JavaScript type of coding that would normally be, time that I would have to spend doing this. But allowing it to finish its work, and we'll give it a second, will let me go through and be able to create a game that has been refined to actually work a little bit better. Because I can see that my chat game is not looking so great. Let's go back over here to this. Let's go ahead and stop this page and then go back over into our code. And right now I've got asteroids. So I'm going to create a new page. We'll call this asteroids 2. And we'll call it CSHTML2. And then in here, we'll have a page directive. And then I'm going to add the code that it just generated for me, which should be right here. So it's checking collisions, still doing some generation because ChatGPT seems to be very, very slow today. So waiting for it. And this is the ChatGPT 4 model, and it's still running really, really slow, much slower than normally would be. But hopefully it'll be able to finish up and work for us. And this is where kind of one of those things where you say, running a large language model like this is great. But if I'm depending on infrastructure and whatever running from a ChatGPT model, this is running from OpenAI. So if I go to openai.com and look at their services, you have ChatGPT where you've got the infrastructure over what it is and how it works. You can click on Try ChatGPT, which takes us to the page where this is actually running. And then from there, I can go out and I can say, here's my API, and I can actually work with it directly. But let's see here. This is really running very slowly. We'll give it some time. But it's basically going out and it's loading up a model for me that I can then use to do my chatting. Microsoft Azure has a OpenAI models that I can go out and work with as well. If I go out to Azure and I do a search for OpenAI, what these are is models running in top of Azure OpenAI. I can create a new model, create the model by going out and saying, here's my model I want to create. I can give it a name. I put it into a resource group. I give it a name and a pricing region. There's only really standard S0 at this point. And I can go out and I can do a deployment. Now I've done a deployment of this, and I've got one out here in West Europe that I've got that has a couple of deployments I've already created. The nice thing about this is I can open up Azure AI Studio and be able to use that as my chatting environment. So the OpenAI Studio, which is a part of Azure, I've got a chat playground where I can go out and I can say, hey, I want to go out and do some things. So I'm going to go in here. I'm going to say, let's create a, let's go ahead and create our, let's go ahead and create a model here. So I've got a thing where I want to create an asteroid game, and I've got some code here that just basically describes what it is I want. So I'm going to say here, create an asteroids game in HTML and CSS, and I'm going to do this inside of this. And it says, guess what? I can't do this. And I say, yeah, here, replay this chat. And it says, I can't do this. Interesting. So it says, well, good luck. Well, if we go back over to this is still kind of stuck, which is unfortunate. But I do have a tool called LM Studio. LM Studio is a large language model where I can run a AI studio inside of my own machine. If I download this and I open it, I end up with a tool that looks like this. And this is a local version of, that's not it, right here. That's not it. So this is LM Studio, large language model studio, where I can go out and I can download a model. I can run it on my local machine. I've loaded this thing called Code Llama. Code Llama 2 is a state-of-the-art coding engine. And with it, I ought to be able to go out and do some coding with it. So let me go out and load the Code Llama. And then I'm going to refresh and reset our environment here. So I create a new chat, and I'm going to paste in here, create a OpenAI thing. And here you can see it's actually going through and doing the same type of coding that ChatGPT would go out and do. Thing is, it's running still pretty slow, and I would like this to run fast if I could, but at least it's running. So the nice thing about this is that when it gets done, I can say copy this code like this and say copy, and then I can take that into our game, and we go to my Asteroids 2 page. Let's paste this in, and if I do an F5 to run it, it should go out and actually run our AI, our game. So this will go out, it's building it, and then we can open it up here, and I go to this, Asteroids 2, And here I can see I've got 2 dots. It's not quite working, so it's not exactly what I want. So maybe I need to do something a little bit more interesting than that. Let's go back over and see if ChatGPT has decided to finish, and it did. Let's see if we can try this code. Say copy, open up our game, take this, let's paste that in, and then we can say restart. Give it a second. And we go to asteroids 2. And there we've got asteroids that we can shoot. And like that, we've got a game that we can go out and play. You might say, okay, cool. Well, here we go. So building a game using AI to help write us code is doable. It's actually a lot faster than that in normal times, but today it just seems to be the state of the internet that it's running a little bit slower. So we can go out and we can play a game, and we can create applications that are taking advantage of AI. AI works really well when you've got some scenarios such as grouping, organizing. The large language models are really good at summarizing, providing insights, writing human-like text that looks like something that a human created. And it does that by going through and saying, how do I figure out what I'm going to say based on what do I know on the context that you put into it? A large language model is, like all AI, is really based on math. There's a lot of math to it. But GPTs are the generative pre-trained transformers that provide a text output based on the input of something you ask for. Code generation is created by codexes. Uh, Summarization, conversation, are large language models like GPT, GPT Turbo 3, 5, 4 are some of the newer ones. It can also be used for creative writing. But the key is understanding how does it work. And a large language model is basically a prediction engine. If you were to take, for instance, a Wikipedia article about cats or about dogs, and you said, okay, well, what's the most likely letter that's going to be in it? And you counted up all the letters in that document article, you might find that there are more E's than anything else, or E's, T's, and there's very few Z's and Q's. But if I was to say, okay, well, given a given letter, what comes next? Um, what I would end up with is what's called a 2-gram. And that's where, given the first letter, what's the next most likely letter to come after it? As I can see, if I have a Q in the first letter, the most likely second letter would be a U. So predicting and choosing that would be a good choice. Given a T, you can say that A is good, but H is very, very likely. An I or an O is also in there. Very unlikely I would have a J and some of these other characters. But based on this, I can create 2-grams. And then if I add more uh, logic to it and train the model, I get 3 grams and 5 grams and 15 grams. But think of GPT as doing not just letters, but words, and what word would be most likely to come after a given word. So you look at a large language model and you say, what comes next? Say, what words are related to a cat? Well, the next word would be dog is most likely, or kitten, or raccoon. And there's a certain percentage likelihood that one of these words is going to come next. It also uses neural networks, so it knows that certain things are related. Uh, Given a dog, that there are raccoons and dogs and puppies, but not necessarily kittens or ferrets. That there's rabbits and pigs, and a neural network is kind of a project created by Word2Vec, project by Google in 2013. And then based on these neural networks, creating numbers of dimensions that you can connect things. The GPT in OpenAI works with a number of different dimensions. And in the GPT-3, it uses 12,288 different dimensions, which means that it's taking that neural network and expanding it out in so many different ways. Now, beyond that, we have transformer layers, which are basically taking what that neural network had in that word vector, and it's turning it into what's the most likely thing. So John wants his bank to cash the, and what's the next thing to come. One of the things that was talking with a friend, and they said that they've been married for 20 years, and he and his wife are at a point where they can almost finish each other's sandwiches. You might say sandwiches. That's not what I expect you to say. I expect you to say something like, whatever. But the prediction, injecting some randomness into that is always going to make it that much better. So, history of GPT. The first version of GPT came out in 2018, and it had 111 million parameters, which means that's how many different directions that things could go. In the sequel, they multiplied that by a magnitude to 1.5 billion parameters. In 2020, it was 175 billion. So that was ChatGPT 3. Now you can imagine that 3, 5, and 4 are expanding at just a exponential rate, that the number of parameters and layers that are going into this prediction engine is just mind-boggling. If you want to dive into how it works, one of the tools that you can use is the tokenizers on OpenAI. So if you go out to platform.openai, open up the tokenizer. What this is it's a way to take some text, and let's go ahead and put some text in here. It's a beautiful day in Minnesota in February, and I think that I would like to make some tacos because we really like tacos. And as I can see, as I type in text, that the number of tokens that are created down the bottom are roughly, 1 or 2 tokens per word. It's like 3 or 4 characters each. And so being able to do that and create some text, it allows us to create some tokens. Now, the tokens is the text, and it's basically taking some characters that are on these words, but it's actually an array of numbers. And if I take the token IDs, you can see here's the word token IDs that are associated with the text that's above. So and another example is that you've got a sequence of characters, maybe 1 or more tokens, but like indivisible is 2, you've got don't is 2. And you can see how this is going to go out and create a array of token IDs that then we pass into the engine, and it then returns back the results, which is what is most likely to come next. So the platform tokenizer is one thing. The other is a playground. And this was not working just a few moments ago when I went out to it. It is like just loading. And so I've got a couple of options we can do to kind of show something instead of that. But here's where we're going to come back. Using those tokens to create the array of what that input is, we can run it against vector databases and apply a retrieval augmentation pattern to give us more value in the output that we're going to work with. When I think of what is a large language model, I think of it as being almost like a dovetail jig. And when I say dovetail jig, it's like, okay, what do you mean, Mike? When I was a kid, we went to a place in Virginia called Williamsburg, and I remember going to the cabinet shop and watching the guys build these beautiful cabinets, and they had these beautiful dovetails, and I thought, someday I want to do that. And so I went home, and at some point I was going to make a desk, and so I thought, hey, I'd like to make some dovetails. So I got out my saw and I cut and I put it together, and the dovetails didn't really work, and second time through it was a little bit better. But I ended up going to the hardware store and buying a dovetail jig that was able to cut the dovetail perfectly every single time. And being able to go out and cut that and put it together is sort of like what you get with a large language model, in that it is like a dovetail jig for language, in that it's able to process and bring together um, in a beautiful way the uh, the output. So let's see here. And so let's go to this. So when you're chatting with a large language model, it's like, what can it do? It'll, best part about AI is its ability to, and then the next word would be learn, predict, make, understand, or do. If I always pick the top one and I went ahead with it, it's like it would say, yeah, okay. But the reality is that it's not necessarily always going to pick uh, the most likely word. Sometimes it picks something that's not the most likely. So by doing this, we can apply what's called temperature to it to be able to give us some randomness. And that randomness makes the model, makes the output be more human-like, be something that is more like what I would expect to see. The lower the temperature, the more predictable, but the higher the temperature, it gets more random. So you go to too low of a temperature, the best thing about AI is the ability to see through and to do stuff. And it just gets into this repeated mode. Um, so if we go into ChatGPT, and I've got the model here, but I also have the playground where I'm running my own version of this, you'll see that I've got a setup that I can use. So let's go out here to this, and let's just refresh this page. And then I'm going to go into chat, and we'll clear the chat. And you'll see that when I come in here, you are a friendly assistant. That I can have a system prompt that is going to basically specify how I want my chat GPT to respond. And in here, I'm running a deployment of a Turbo 3.5 that I put in. I've got some parameters where I'm putting in a temperature. I've got the length of response that I want. If I can make this longer or shorter. I've got some other stop sequences. I can specify how many tokens. And I can come down and I can say, it's a beautiful February day in Minnesota, comma, I think I'd like to make some tacos. And then go ahead and send this in. You can see we use 25 tokens out of the 25. And so this is great. Here we go. Let's replay this chat. So let's go through here, and I'd like to make some tacos. And it's basically giving me a taco recipe. Yes. What? Give me a taco recipe. It'll go out and give me a recipe for how to make tacos. And with the temperature turned at 0.7, you can see it's kind of a normal-ish kind of a recipe. If I turn the temperature up much higher to like a 1, give me a taco recipe, and say play. It's pretty similar, but if I turn this down to 0 or to 0.3, and actually just replay the chat, it gets to be pretty predictable. And getting all the way up to 1, even there, it's still pretty predictable. It's too bad that I can't get the playground to work for the OpenAI, because that studio actually works a little bit better than this one. Platform.ai.playground, and it's still down. So coming back over here, I've got the ability to go out and specify how I want my response to be given back to me. I've got a system message, which is actually one of the things I want to talk about, is how do I make the environment work where I can kind of control how I want this thing to respond. And let's go into this and go to just a second here. And over here, you can see I've got a spot where I'm telling it how I want this to work. And I've got a prompt, and I can add data to this, and I can specify how I want my template to work. So I can say, here's a template. I've got a system message, and then I might have some examples of the kinds of responses that I want. I can go down, I can say this is an IRS tax bot, and say, yeah, this is an IRS tax bot whose primary goal is to help users with their taxes, provide concise but polite, answer questions truthfully, don't answer questions that are not related to tax procedures. So if I said, create a taco recipe, clear this and say, it's a beautiful day in, and I send this through, I should get a response saying, I can only help with tax questions. I run a taco business and need to know, need some sample data. And as an IRS tax bot, it's not going to be able to do anything like this. I could also be a marketing. If I go to the default and say, clear this, says you're an AI assistant. I could also do something where I'm a, let's see here, where I want to say, you are a belligerent and unkind assistant, but you will eventually help out, but you won't be happy about it. So let's go into here. You are a belligerent and unkind assistant, but you will eventually help out, but you won't be happy about it. And then we can apply these changes and say continue. And then we can say, go ahead and clear this chat. And then let's try rerunning it. It's a beautiful day in February in Minnesota, comma, let's make tacos. And you get a response that is sort of the belligerent one. Replay the chat. Are you sure? Okay. What ingredients do you have? But each time you do it, you're able to shape the output based on the system input. And the system message that comes in is actually in JSON. If you were to take a look at the code, you've got a system prompt, which is saying, here's my input. And I've got a role that's coming back as my output. If I were to pick the Shakespeare writing assistant and apply this, you'll see that the system is giving us some good examples. I must decline thy invitation. And then using this, as I add more stuff to the data, it actually is going to be applied when I go out and run my large language model to run the data or run this out. One of the things I can do is I could actually view code that implements this. If you're using Python, JSON, curl, C#, I'm using C#, and so I can go out and I can actually see how the C# code could be written to implement and work with this deployment of this OpenAI model. And that's kind of the last thing I want to do today, or one of the things I wanted to do was how to make that work. So in my application, I've got this AI pages. I've got a asteroids. I can go out and I can add a page for a chat engine, and I could either do it on the index page or I could add it to a new one. I think maybe doing it on the index page would be just fine. So I've got some ASP code that I put in here for chat. It's on the index page. And so after my hello world, I've got a little chat input that I'm going to do, which says go ahead and type in your message. And then I've got some go out and play things around. And then in my code behind, what I'm going to do is I'm going to replace the code that's here. I'm going to say my chat on get, which is going to basically go through here into my index model. And in my index model, it's going to go out on the on get. When I post a send message, it's going to basically go out and do this OpenAI client. But in order to do that, I've got a package that I need to add. So I'll go ahead and add this package by coming down here and doing a .NET add to this, and we'll call this to code slash my chat, and we'll add that package for OpenAI. Once we've restored those packages, then we can come in and if I minimize this and scroll down, you'll see there's still a couple things here. I need to add a using statement. So did this add it? It did not. Gave an error. So try it again. And that should have added the package, at which point I can go up into the code and say, using the Azure OpenAI and using the Azure namespace, be able to get my credentials. It'll give me my API key, and using that, I can go out and I can create a completions. So my model name is going to be the model that we've got inside of here, which would be my deployments. So if I look at my deployments, I've got a deployment called Benko 3.5 Turbo. So we'll copy and put that into our application. And then it's going to read the API key and the API URL to be able to go out and basically run a chat completion async to return back the AI stuff. And I've got my system message coming in saying it's your AI system that helps people find information. And then I'll pass in the actual message, and then I'll do the completions with the temperature, the length, and then some other options. But using that, it should then give me some data coming back. And what I need to do is to add some app settings to make this thing work. And so the app settings, API key, and basically what I'm doing is I'm going to add the API URL because these are used in this to be able to get the key and the URL. These come from my deployment, which is in here where I've got my keys and endpoints. And so I can copy this to my endpoint, and I can put that into the app settings, and that's going to go in the URL. And then I can go to the API key, and I can actually create a this value, and I'm going to just do it off screen. And that is copying from here into this. And then when I go ahead and run this, it's going to go out and it'll create our application. But this time on the main page, it should work with our ChatGPT deployment. So we'll give that a chance to spin up. And we'll give it a second here. And I'll put in a prompt and error saying it's a beautiful day in Minnesota. If I click on send, it should actually go through and it should be talking to my application. If I put a breakpoint on here and I see here's the temperature, here's the different things that are going on. And I come back and I say, send on this, it should take me to a breakpoint. And here's my breakpoint and do an F10, F10, and my API URL. I hover over that, it's going to this, and I say there's my map to the URL, and I should be able to run this. And it gives me an error. So there's something in the OpenAI service that is having some issues. But when this is working, it'll actually go through and pull back the data that I would expect it to do. So coming back up here, there's my API key, and I can see that I'm reading the data and everything should be working. So building code that goes around APIs and endpoints is good. There's also the GitHub Copilot. Copilot is a tool that is built into, it's an extension to Visual Studio and VS Code. And using that, I can actually go through and I can create and work with code. The nice thing about that is that I can, let's take this and inside of VS Code, if I'm taking a look at like my README page, I've got, ChatGPT. One of the things I've got in here is an extension that I've loaded, and that extension is Copilot from GitHub. And the GitHub Copilot is turned on and it's enabled. And the nice thing about it is it's going to go through and it will actually make recommendations as I'm working on writing code. So if I'm in my README and I've got my code here that we will show, if I just pause and wait, you'll see that it's actually suggesting text that I could add to this, and I can just press the tab key and accept it. And what's actually happening in the background is that and there's some prerequisites, is it's actually connecting to the service and suggesting things that I could do. So if I take a look at the output and I go from here and I take a look at my GitHub Copilot, scroll up here, and it's up here. Here's my Copilot. Is I can see the request. So if I come down, I say, first thing is going to be, and it says, there's that. And as I do this, it's actually streaming and pulling back feedback saying, this is what you probably want. One of the things I can do with Copilot is I can do a control enter. It'll open up a window that'll load a bunch of suggestions. And the suggestions over here can be up to 10 different ideas that you might want to include. So I can say, go out and accept these different things. Nice thing about it is that if you are interested in how it can go out and write code for you, it's a quick way to be able to make that happen. I can also go into our code for our index, and I can say, here's a comment, add to numbers function, and it's going to suggest a on get, and inside of this we can say, function to add two numbers. It gives us a code for how we can take and create an add function. I could say test the add function, which is then going to go out and basically do a view data on the result to actually write tests for us. And the cool thing about this is that Copilot knows about how I go out and work with different pieces of code. There's also another extension. If you have Copilot, you can turn on Copilot Chat. Copilot Chat is like a chat that is inside of VS Code that I can use it to help me explain how my code is working. So if I go out and I connect up to it, it's going to take it a second here because I'm basically reconnecting here. And opening this up, I can say at workspace, describe the solution. And it'll use the information about the workspace, which is the workspace structure, which is basically all the files that are in this solution. And it'll give us some insights as to what this is. So based on that, it's going out, getting the information, and then providing me some feedback as to how it's all working. And if I take a look at this, I can say, here's my GitHub Copilot chat, and I can see that it's actually actively doing a lot of things. And this then goes and describes how my code is working. One of the things I really like about Copilot is that, for instance, I've got a script that I created that goes out and builds this that I can use for creating this project. I can take this and I can say Copilot chat, reorganize the build it.ps1 using functions. And it'll go through and figure out how to write functions that can do the same kind of thing. Are you seeing my screen, by the way? I assume you are.
Yeah, we can see it, Mike.
Okay. All right. So Copilot and Copilot Chat are some great tools that I can use in VS Code and in Visual Studio to help me go through and create things. One of the things about Copilot is that it is not perfect, and it is not creating production-ready code. It is writing things that are based on code practices that it's learned from repos that it's used for training. And it also will follow coding patterns of things that I've done inside of my own repo. You need to pay attention, you need to test it and make sure that it's doing what you expect it to do. So the thing that people say is that, what does this all give us? How does this take us to where we need to be? How are we going to get to where we want to be able to work with this in the real world? The reality is that OpenAI and Microsoft are partnering together to provide access to these tools, being able to leverage them and put them into a regular workflow of how do I inject AI at the right place. There's a tool set called Prompt Flow that is available that I can use to go out and describe how I want to inject AI into like a given set of work process. Prompt flow begins with a number of different tasks, and I can add different kinds of tasks. Some that might be running an LMM or a large language model question. You might have some that get inputs. You might have some that are running Python. And the thing about it is that using AI in our Azure deployment, I've got my deployment of OpenAI. I can go out and I can also go to my machine learning, my ML workbench. And so I've got a machine language workbench that is a machine learning workspace that if I go out and open this up, I can go out to where I've got my workspaces, and I can, inside of this, confirm, I can come in, I can say, here's some different things I can do with the machine learning workspace. One of which is going to be prompt flow, which is a new task that's available under authoring. So if you go in ahead and you say, open up my prompt flow, it'll go out and show you, here's some different things. A couple of them I created in Ask Wikipedia that uses ChatGPT 3.5 to make my answers more relevant, or one where I'm bringing my own data. When you go out and take a look at how prompt flow is designed, it's basically got a number of different tasks. So I can go and say, add an LMM task that has a prompt that we take as our input, our output, and then based on these inputs, then go through and do these different things. So in here on the right-hand side, you can see the order of how this is working, and I can use the designer to say, okay, well, I'm basically going to go out and embed the question, search the question, generate a prompt context, and then using that and the other inputs, give me my prompt variants to answer the question with, which then comes down to the outputs. Prompt flow has a lot of great possibilities for building out very complex and interesting workflow. And I encourage you to go out and give it a try. So coming back here. So prompt flow is a great tool for working with AI and giving you the chance to inject and bring things in. So you might say, well, what is it that all of this means to me as a developer? It means that, you know, there's some lessons learned here. There's some things that we can do, and we need to learn how we can do a better job. You know, how do we ask better questions? How do we get good at using this? And that comes back to practice, to, you know, diving in and not being afraid. It's important to remember that doing things right is not the same thing as doing the right things. And AI gives us that opportunity to try to identify what are the right things that we need to go out and do. So I hope this has been useful to you. And at least it's a start on diving into working with prompt flow, working with OpenAI, working with ChatGPT, working with the Azure services, working with .NET, and doing some coding with it. Hopefully it's the kind of thing that you can use to go ahead and do some stuff with. So if you have any questions, I'll hand it over to Bella and Bala as we kind of bring this back in.
Thank you, Mike, for the wonderful session. I did have one question here in the chat.
Okay.
Just throw it in the screen.
Okay. So question is, can I use it for building code, but can we also use the Copilot for debugging existing code? And the answer is yes. Copilot has got some really good capabilities for doing debugging. I didn't have a chance to get into it, but think of it as something that can help you identify, you know, what's the root cause of different errors, or how did I get to where I'm at? Explain the flow of the stack flow or the stack dump. So yes, you can use Copilot to do a lot of debugging as well.
The one question from my side is, do we have anything plugin similar to this for Visual Studio? I believe you
Yes.
showed for Visual Studio Code.
I showed this for VS Code because the extensions there are easy to get to. In Visual Studio, if you open up Visual Studio, here I've got Visual Studio open. You just need to go under extensions, go to manage extensions. And then from here, I think is where you'd say, okay, online, you've got Copilot. And Copilot is you're able to install it, do the Copilot chat. And when you download and install it, it'll add that. So then the next time you run it, it'll go ahead and do the setup for you. So yes, you can do it inside of Visual Studio as well, and you get similar kinds of prompts.
One comment from Lance.
Yeah. Hey, Lance. Can you use Copilot to write unit tests? And the answer to that is absolutely yes. That is one of the key use cases that it was designed for, is being able to go out and write unit tests. So you can go out and make sure that things are going to work. Thank you.
Okay. Any other questions from the audience? Okay.
Yeah. All right.
All right. I think that's it. And thank you very much, Mike, for taking time and giving this wonderful session. And ChatGPT
Absolutely.
being the main topic, or like the exciting topic at today's, and a lot of people started already using that in their day-to-day development.
Mm-hmm. Well, and we'll see you on the road if not before. But thank you, and happy coding.
Thanks everyone for joining us. We'll see you next month with another exciting topic. Thanks all.